exist among you, yet so many friendships still to be made. And so I really urge you to do that. The other thing is, I think, is to make sure you ask questions in sessions, informally, of each other, to ask. If you don't know, it's really the best thing is to ask, to be here to learn. We're all educators. We know what it's like when we want our students to learn. Sometimes it's hard to make the transition from being in front of the classroom to being in the classroom. Yet it's such an important transition to be able to make. And so I really urge you to take risks, to go to maybe some sessions that are a little bit off your area of comfort, maybe something you don't know anything about, and give it a try and see what you can learn, see who you can meet, see what friendships you can take from here and beyond. We at the School of Continuing Education very much want you to stay engaged with what we do and with what the British Council does. There's so many things that we offer, both of our organizations around the country, so many educational programs, so many ways to get involved, and we really, the strength of what each of our institutions does is based upon the strength of your engagement with us and your involvement with us, the feedback we get from you, our opportunity to work with you on any number of projects and initiatives and offerings, etc. Particularly as we come out of the pandemic, and hopefully we're coming out of the pandemic, there are opportunities to do more and new things. Reimagining, which is part of the name of this conference, the theme of this conference, to reimagine. You know, it shouldn't just be a word. I mean, to think, to reimagine, to not only use your imagination, but to use it in new ways, in a new reality. That, I think, is our challenge. It's not just an opportunity, and it is an opportunity, but it's our challenge to do it, and to do it in a way that also sends a message to our peers, to our colleagues, and also to our students. So I want to thank you all for taking time out of your lives to be here. It's the weekend. You could be home. You could be doing 1,000 other things. But you're here with us. We're here together. And it's going to be a great 2 days, and 2 days that launch off into something else that's being reimagined as it's happened. So thank you very, very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Dr. James. Dr. James is not only the Dean of the School of Continuing Education at the American University, but he's also a big fan of jazz, and he's a very active member of a mysterious jazz group, and he plays drums. That's not the only surprising fact today. I'd like to welcome Elizabeth White, Country Director, British Council, Egypt. She's not only the first female country director for a country as big as Egypt, but she's also a very experienced mountain climber. She climbs mountains.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very, very good morning to all of you, and a very big and a very warm welcome to all of you to this 8th edition of ILACE. Now, I don't know about you, but this is my favorite time of the year. The temperature is dropping and becoming lovely. Everybody around you has come back from a summer with a holiday or a bit of rest or a different pace, and is rested and refreshed and looking forward with, I hope, with energy and enthusiasm to the beginning of a new year, a new academic year. It's a great time. And for us this year, it's an even greater time because, as James has said, and Mohammed have said, that this is the 8th ILACE, but for 2 years we've been away from each other. We've been online, we've been meeting through Zoom and through screens, and not having the pleasure and the benefit of meeting face-to-face, with those face-to-face conversations. It's a great joy to me to see this audience here today, this big audience at the beginning of the conference, and I hope that that joy will sustain us throughout the conference. For me, as for James, the ILACE conference 4 years ago was my first ever public event in the British Council, and so it remains, it has a very strong and a very important part in my heart. It's also, I'm an ex-English teacher, my heart remains in teaching. For that reason also I'm glad to be here. And I'm happy to celebrate the ongoing partnership in ILACE with AUC and with the chairs and the committee of ILACE, and the commitment to achieving ever greater successes in assessment and language teaching. The AUC is a venerable institution, as we know. 102, is it now? 103? 102, 3? 102 or 3? The British Council is also reasonably venerable. We've been the British Council exists in 110 countries around the world, but the first one was Egypt. In 1934, we opened the first overseas office here in Egypt, and our commitment to playing a key role in Egypt and in the region remains the same, and our commitment also to English, where we've always worked for all this time. Our strategic partnership with higher education institutions and with the Ministries of Education in particular remains a strength for our work and an importance for us in supporting the thousands of teachers across Egypt in teaching and training and assessment. We work with the biggest pool of great teachers and teacher educators in the Middle East and North Africa through our partnerships, and we're proudly continuing to support Egypt's ambition in language education and educational reform through teacher training programs, through teaching and learning resources, through school networks, and through working with our colleagues on thought leadership events like this one today and tomorrow. Because it's always relevant to keep up to date, it's always relevant to learn what's new, it's always relevant and important to learn new ways of looking at what we do every day. But now more than ever, it's important because over the last 2 years, these 2 years when COVID-19 swept the earth and changed our way of working, our way of thinking, our way of cooperating, our way of teaching, our way of learning, everything has been changed, and the effects of that change, we know some of them now, but some of the effects will continue to be long-lasting and important in the way that we think, in the way that our learners think. And now is the time for thinking again about how we work as teachers and learners and trainers indeed, and about the good assessment practice that we'll need to support the teaching and learning. I believe very firmly that you can do nothing if you don't work in partnership. You can do nothing if you don't work in good fellowship with the people around you. I hope that this conference allows you the chance to set up, not just to learn new things, but to enjoy new partnerships and new communities of practice. It's a very powerful gathering full of potential, and I wish you the success in the conference and in realizing that potential in your professional year to come. I'll finish by thanking, as ever, our hosts and partners in AUC and Dr. James Ketterer, the organizing committee, Hanan, Amira, Mai, Lamia, Betsy, the co-chairs, Hala and Mohammed, our strategic partners, Dr. Sana from the Nile TESOL, and my colleagues from the British Council, and Dr. Mina Patel, our keynote speaker, who's with us here for these 2 days. From the Ministry of Education, Madam Iman Youssef, and I believe from Al-Azhar, Dr. Ismail al-Sherbini. So very, very welcome to all of you. I'll finish with 2 pieces of advice. One is be hopeful, be optimistic that this gathering can change such a great deal in the way of teaching and learning and make such a big difference. The other one is never stand on a chair. Thank you very much. Have a great conference. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Elizabeth White. Thank you very much. I do appreciate the efforts of the American University in Cairo and the British Council. Personally speaking, after 2 years of COVID, I want to tell you a story that 2 years ago, when the whole COVID thing started, many of our colleagues and teachers fell down in the dumps, felt so down, because we actually missed this face-to-face gathering. And I remember that I told my mentor and supervisor, it's really hard to teach online. I want to see students, I don't want to see cameras. I don't feel that Zoom is the solution. I feel that I'm teaching Zombies, not Zoom students. And my mentor and supervisor at the American University in Cairo told me, you have to adapt to the changes by developing yourself. Let me welcome this great lady, my mentor and supervisor, Dr. Sana Makhlouf. She is my mentor at the American University in Cairo and the president of Nile TESOL.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for this beautiful introduction. Good morning, everyone. Today, it gives me great pleasure to share with you the opening of the International Language Assessment Conference in Egypt, which is offered through a partnership between AUC and the British Council. After holding the conference online for the past 2 years, having it face-to-face once more makes this event even more special. As we know, ILACE has stemmed from the Nile TESOL Association a few years ago and has proven to be one of the most successful conferences in the MENA region with particular focus on assessment. Thank you. Is this better? Okay, thank you. Here? Okay, I'm too short. People cannot see me. I know. Yeah, okay. Okay, so here I am. With the ongoing global changes which we are all part of and very much aware of, one cannot but realize the impact these changes have had on assessment-related issues which have affected educators, administrators, and students worldwide. Therefore, the ILACE conference co-chairs and organizing committee have meticulously selected the most relevant, important, and pertinent topics for all of us to benefit from. And for this, we are all very grateful. We are also very grateful to have with us today two very exceptional keynote speakers who will shed light on the future of assessment, its implications for teachers, and assessment-related issues in our post-COVID era. I hope you navigate the program book very carefully, attend the various presentations that are offered, engage with professionals in conducive conversations, see how to implement new ideas in your classes, focus on today's changes and challenges and how they have impacted our students, and try to take short breaks to discover the beauty of our campus and the long history behind its buildings. Once the conference is over, I hope you take the time to submit proposals to our annual Nile TESOL 2023 conference, which will be held at the AUC new campus on January 23rd and 24th, 2023. The call for proposals is now ready on the conference website, and we do hope to see all of you there as well. On behalf of everyone who has worked so hard and so diligently to make this conference what it is today, I wish you all a very enjoyable, productive, and rewarding conference experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sana. And this actually takes us back to partnerships. And we are very proud and above all very grateful to our strategic partnerships by choice. Our partnership with the biggest teacher association in the Middle East and North Africa, Nile TESOL, and our partnership by choice with the Ministry of Education and Al-Azhar. We're very keen to continue to benefit from those partnerships and learn from them, because we work with people but we also work for people. So thank you very much for our speakers today. And just a bit of instructions to continue the conference. Please keep, shall I say this? Keep your mask on. I'm not wearing a mask, but anyway, stay vigilant. It's not relevant anymore. Just to stay vigilant and keep space between you and other people. And for smaller rooms, please keep your masks on. Check your program book, select your sessions, be dynamic, be on top of your things, manage your time, select sessions that are useful and relevant to your teaching context. And before I hand over to Mina and Patsy for the plenary talk, I'd like to leave you with a poem written by Alan Maley, the world-renowned educationalist, about teachers. So the poem is like a dialogue between a teacher and somebody else. This somebody else could be a head teacher, a school principal, a parent, or somebody, we don't know. What do you do? I'm a teacher. What do you teach? People. What do you teach them? English? You mean grammar, verbs, nouns, pronunciation, conjugation, articles and particles, negatives and interrogatives? Yeah, that too. What do you mean that too? Well, I also try to teach them how to think and feel. Show them inspiration, aspiration, cooperation, participation, consolation, innovation. Help them think about globalization, exploitation, confrontation, incarceration, discrimination, degradation, subjugation. How inequality brings poverty, how intolerance brings violence, how need is denied by greed, how isms become prisons, how thinking and feeling can bring about healing. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe you should stick to language, forget about anguish. You can't change the world. But if I did that, I'd be a cheater, not a teacher. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic conference. Over to you, Betsy. Now. Once a teacher, always a teacher. I took the microphone again from Betsy. Before Betsy introduces Mina, then we kick off for the plenary talk and the concurrent sessions. Can I ask our guests today to stand up for a selfie? This is the selfie of the year with you, with 650 teachers.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, well, you have been welcomed, but also let me welcome you to ILACE. We are, as you can tell, really delighted to be back on this campus again. Thank you to all of you who have suffered through the past 2 years with us online. I think I see some familiar faces here today, so welcome back, and welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. So it is my honor to be able to introduce to you the first of our 2 plenary speakers, Mina Patel, who is joining us from the Assessment Research Group of the British Council. We've been very, very lucky and honored over the years to be able to host a number of plenary speakers coming from the Assessment Research Group. So thank you for being here. If you've looked at the program book, you probably know a little bit about Mina. She is a researcher, but she's not just a researcher. She doesn't just do language assessment. She's an expert in teaching, teacher training, materials development, and what I think is most impressive is that Mina is also a doctoral candidate at the University of Bedfordshire, and I find that incredible that, just like us, she is continuing to learn and grow as a professional. Mina has worked in the UK, where you are based right now, Greece, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia. So I hope you will join me in welcoming her to Egypt. She was able to get it going before. I know. Sorry, Hala. I can't get it off this screen onto my PowerPoint. Maybe we just need to. Like this. Otherwise, it's still okay. Cool. This is your presentation, right? Then F5. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good morning. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Elizabeth, thank you for such a very nice introduction. I'm not sure I deserve it all, but thank you very much. Before I say my thank yous, and I'd like to start with those, I would just like to say that's a really tough act to follow, those 5 people who did the opening. So we have a drummer, a mountain climber, the president of the biggest teachers association in MENA, and Alan Maley. Where did he come from? So thank you very much for being such a tough act to follow. But I'd like to thank the British Council and the American University in Cairo for inviting me to this very, very special conference. And I've been told by my colleagues at the British Council that it is a very special conference, and it's a privilege for me to be here. 2 people I'd like to give a shout out to particularly is Hala and her team at the British Council for helping me just to get here physically. Thank you so much. That's been amazing. But also, I'd like to thank Dr. Mohammed from the university, because I had the absolute pleasure of bumping into him at the front gate this morning, and he escorted me to this room. And you know what? It was like walking down the red carpet at the Oscars. Everybody knew him, and it was, hello there, selfie here, selfie there. And I thought, I'm in the presence of royalty. So that was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions. I am going to give you an overview of the future of English language assessment, implications for teachers, but also the systems that teachers work within. During question time, as Dr. James said, please ask questions, challenge me, push me further, ask about things that you think I haven't mentioned, because that is the point. I would actually prefer to do this plenary as a workshop, but it's a plenary, so I am going to talk, give you some input, and then maybe we can have a conversation at the workshop that follows. I hope that's all right. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a roadmap of what I'm going to be talking about the next few minutes. I'm going to talk about general assessment practices as I see them, a very, very general overview before the pandemic. What I thought we were doing before the pandemic, or what I thought was happening. I want to talk about the Future of English project, which is where the findings that I'm going to present to you come from about where we think assessment might be going for English language in the future. I want to talk a little bit about the comprehensive learning system, the system within which teaching, learning, and assessment sit. And then, obviously, I want to talk about future directions for assessment. And these are tentative, and I'll explain why at the time. And finally, and I think this is the really important thing for me, what this means for education systems and teachers. What are the implications? What do we have to think about as we move forward, as we've all been saying, hopefully out of the pandemic and into the future? That's quite a lot to cover, so I might go quickly, but as I said, there will be time for questions. Assessment before the pandemic. Now, this is a very, very general overview. And this is global. This is not just for Egypt, right? Diagnostic assessment for placement purposes. Teachers generally do that, whether it's done for you before your students come into class, or whether you do it yourselves just to gauge where your students are. Teachers engage in class quizzes. We all do. Everyone loves a quiz. That can be for progress purposes. It could be for motivation purposes. It could just be for fun, and that's fine. End-of-unit tests provided in course books. Most teachers in the world follow a course book. Most course books these days have end-of-unit tests to support the teacher and to support the learning that's going on. Many teachers engage in a variety of classroom-based assessment. So informal assessment that we do on an ongoing basis, just to find out lesson by lesson how our students are doing. And this might be in the form of just a Q&A. It might be in the form of a very short dialogue. It could be in different ways. But most teachers, knowingly or unknowingly, we all do this. Teacher written tests. I know many teachers, I spent a lot of my time in Malaysia. In Malaysia, many teachers still write their own tests at the end of the year or at the end of the term. The quality of those tests, I'll be honest with you, are variable, but many teachers still do this. Tests provided by local or national education authorities, and these are big drivers. These are end-of-year tests, these are national tests, these are high-stakes tests sometimes, but many teachers around the world are given tests to use with their students in order to assess mostly achievement. Okay? Now, this isn't a definitive list. There are lots more, and I'm sure you'll be able to tell me later on. But this is generally, I think, covers the kind of assessment that happens in classrooms all over the world. So if we kind of just summarize that, we've got formal assessment taking place, informal assessment. Assessment on a local level assessment on a national level in standardized forms. We have teacher-developed assessment, but we have assessment that is provided for us. So there is a whole plethora of assessment that is available and that teachers are engaged in all of the time. And this is pre-pandemic. Who could have predicted the coronavirus? Who could have predicted the changes it would bring about in our lives, not just in education, but our lives completely? Who can predict what's going to happen in the future? Anyone in this room? No, I don't think so. But in terms of English language and its future, one gentleman gave it a pretty good go to predict what might happen, and that was David Graddol. When he wrote English Next in 2006, he did a lot of research, he visited a lot of countries, he talked to an awful lot of people, and he tried to predict the future of English for the next 15 years. And in some ways, I'm not going to go into the details because we don't have the time, in some ways, his predictions were quite accurate. English would be the global lingua franca still. Other languages would begin to challenge the authority and the ownership of English. Global English, we'd start talking about Englishes, not just English. But he, in English Next, and I know some of you know it, it's free to download if you'd like to look at it from the British Council website. English Next provided a platform from which to have discussions about the English language, and it did provoke a great many discussions about it. So, as the pandemic hit, the British Council decided to look at the English language and go back to Graddol and see whether his predictions had come true or not, and where we were with English, simply because the pandemic had brought about so much change in education, change in how English is used, change in the way that people wanted to use the language. And we saw this just through observation, through our network. Elizabeth said we operate in 110 countries. An awful amount of information was coming at us about what was happening in classrooms, at workplaces. So the British Council embarked on a project called The Future of English. It's a multi-stage project. We hope that it will provide insights and trends that will define the role of English as a global language over the next decade. We hope that this project will inform language policy and education reform. We hope, importantly, that it will lay out a research agenda into the English language, its uses and its usage over the next decade and more. So this is a research project we embarked on. It's multi-stage, and we planned for 3 phases. Phase 1 was to evaluate Graddol's 14 trends about English, and from there, draft a new set of trends or predictions of our own. So from Graddol's 14, we proposed another 16 trends. Phase 2, phase 1 was all desk research. In phase 2, we thought, well, we actually need to talk to people who are using the language, people around the world, people who know better than us what's happening in their own context. So phase 2, we stress tested the predictions at regional roundtables. We invited policymakers, influencers, academics to talk to us about where they thought English was going, what they thought about our predictions. And we thought by doing this, we'd gather the information and be able to refine our own predictions. And phase 3, which is the phase we're in now, we are developing a long-term research agenda based on phases 1 and 2. So In phase 3, we have funded 4 global research projects where data is being collected in over 40 countries. The research teams are global, so there are UK researchers, but there are researchers all around the world as well. So that's the phase we're in at the moment. And based on the data that we collected in phase 1 and 2, we are actually writing the findings up into a book which will be published next year. So watch this space. For this plenary, I'd like to focus on the information we gathered from phase 2, because I think that's the most relevant for you. So we did 14 roundtables across 49 countries and territories, and we spoke to 92 policymakers, influencers, and academics. Now, in terms of qualitative research, that's an awful lot of data. That's an awful lot of data. So everything that we were told and we were asked and everything that was suggested, we've collated it all and we've analyzed it. And I will share some of the findings with you in just a moment. The policymakers, just to give you an indication of the wide range of people we spoke to, though everybody we spoke to had a job related to the English language in their country. But they didn't just come from English or education. They came from human resources, they came from sport, they came from science. So we spoke to a wide range of people because I think, and this is one of the things that's come out in the data, English is not just about English anymore. English is about everything. It's about different subjects, it's about employment, it's about all of the things that Hala read out from Alan Mayly's poem. And I'll make that a little bit clearer in just a moment. So in Middle East and North Africa, we actually held 3 roundtables because we appreciated the diversity and the size of the region that we're working in. So we had 1 roundtable for Maghreb, 1 for Gulf, and 1 for Levant. And Egypt was part of the Levant roundtable. Now, what I'm going to present to you are just highlights. I can't present all of the data, we just don't have the time, but there were 3 main highlights that came out of that roundtable that I think are very, very interesting. So participants talked about the status of English for the countries represented. They talked about English language provision, and they talked about English and technology. Now, the third one, you probably think everybody's talking about technology, of course it's there, but it's interesting what they said. So, for the countries that are represented, English is on the rise. English is still important, but its status varies across the countries represented. So in some countries, English is almost a second language. In other countries, it's still a foreign language. So there is huge diversity in how English is seen, even within one small part of the world. And I think that's incredibly important for us to remember. Increasing diversity of English language provision needs to be supported to ensure quality in both public and private sectors. Now, this isn't just for this region, it's not just for Egypt. Globally, during the pandemic, there has been a rise in private sector provision for English language and related subjects. And that's fine and that's great. But one of the things that came out in the roundtable, one of the things that we were told, is that it needs monitoring. That mushrooming of private sector provision needs monitoring, but at the same time, the provision in the public sector needs support and bolstering. And one of the things that came out during the opening, I think all of our speakers mentioned, is partnerships. And one of the things that has come out from all of our data globally is private and public working together to strengthen the provision. Not having isolated different solutions, though they will always be there, but working together to increase and bolster the provision of English language for students at all levels and all ages. Technology as an enabler and a disruptor. I don't think this comes as a surprise to anyone. There was a lot of talk in the roundtables about the divide between those who have, those who don't have, where there is infrastructure to support technology and provision through that, and where there is not. And though technology is an enabler, and it has enabled, it's enabled the whole world almost through the pandemic. There are many cases where, because of poor infrastructure and lack of access, that people have been left out. They haven't been able to access the materials and the opportunities that are there for them. So, although it's a great thing, it needs to be managed and monitored. Okay. So these are just the highlights. This isn't all the information from the roundtable for this region, but they are the highlights. They're the strongest things that came through. Now, if we look at just those highlights in the context of the comprehensive learning system, this is something that Barry O'Sullivan, who heads up the assessment research group at the British Council, this is from a paper that he wrote on the comprehensive learning system. And the paper proposes that for learning programs to function efficiently, they should be seen as one system. One system. I love the fact that ILACE is about assessment. I love more the fact that the people I've talked to so far in the short time I've been here don't talk about assessment in isolation, because it shouldn't be treated in isolation. It is part of a bigger system. And that bigger system includes the curriculum, it includes delivery, whatever the mode of delivery. So the comprehensive learning system talks about the fact that the three core elements need to work in harmony. They need to be joined up. Because if they're not, at some point, the system will cease to function as it should do. Not saying that the system will collapse, but it will not function as it should do. And when that happens, we are not optimizing learning opportunities for our students. So bear that in mind. So when we talk about the private and public working together, when we talk about technology and the possible integration of it, or the possible uses of it, how does it fit in there? What needs to change? What needs to adapt? These are not small changes. These are big changes, but they can be introduced over time. And we all know, as educators, that change doesn't happen instantly. Change takes time. If we just look at our students' progress in the classroom, students develop at different rates. Their skills develop differently. And so, for anyone here that is from an education system and has the authority to implement change, please think about time when we think about change. What does this mean for English language assessment? Okay, so the 4 points I'm going to present next to you come from the global findings. These aren't just for this region, but they are relevant globally. One thing that all the participants told us is that speaking and listening need not only to be taught well, but also to be well assessed. So at the moment, or not at the moment, possibly pre-pandemic, most, not all, education systems focused on assessing writing and reading, and possibly listening. Speaking, not so much, because it's resource intensive. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resource. So often we leave it out. But what employers are telling us is they want the speaking. They want employees who can communicate orally to their customers and clients and to each other. So I think for many, many systems around the world, speaking and also listening will need to come in to the assessment fold. And I've just talked about this, so the importance of testing and assessment as part of the learning system will increase. So I talk to many teachers, many educators, many academics and policymakers all of the time. And very often in the assessment research group, we are called in to advice on programs, change programs, education programs. And one of the things that we find more often than not is that assessment is the last thing that is thought about. It's an add-on. We've thought about the curriculum, we've thought about the training and the materials, but what about the assessment? And it often is just an add-on. What we are being told is that assessment needs to be up front and center. It needs to be thought about when you think about the curriculum. It needs to be thought about when you think about the materials. And it certainly needs to be thought about when you think about teacher training. And it cannot be isolated anymore. It needs to be integrated in order for us to give the best opportunities to our students. Now, when I talk about assessment being integrated into a system, I am not just talking about achievement tests. I'm talking about learning, assessment for learning, assessment as learning, whatever you want to call it, because it keeps changing all the time. I'm talking about being able to give feedback. I'm talking about knowing why you're assessing your students, what the purpose is, and therefore, how do I do it? What's the best way to do it? And once I've done it, how do I feed that back to my students so they can build that into their learning and I can build it into my teaching? That's what I'm talking about when we talk about integrating assessment into learning and teaching. The use of alternative methods of assessing English as a global language will continue to accelerate. So, there were lots of discussions about standardized English. What English do you teach to? What English do you help your students with? Is it British? Is it American? Is it Malaysian English, Singapore English, Egyptian English? What is it? And I think what we're hearing from our information is the recognition of other Englishes being important. For international tests, for study, yes, standardized English will be there for a long, long time. It has to be there. But when we're helping our students learn, what English is acceptable? What English are they using? What English do their students want to use? What English are teachers happy with? And more importantly, and this is a point I'll come to later, when teachers go through pre-service education, what is the guidance and advice they are given on English they are to use and teach in the classroom? That is a really important question to me, because that's where it all begins. But we'll talk about pre-service education in just a moment. Equality, diversity, and inclusion. Massively, massively important, particularly through the pandemic, and actually it's been emphasized by the pandemic. Assessing online, How? When? Why? If you think about large international test providers, a lot of them have taken their tests online. They've had obstacles, there have been problems. There are complexities with testing online. Not to say it doesn't work, not to say it's not great, but a lot of thought needs to go into it. A lot of skill is involved in assessing online. And how many students does that exclude if we assess exclusively online? But I'm not just talking about assessing online. I'm talking about provision through accommodations, recognizing that students have impairments that we need to consider when we assess. And as teachers, how can we support that? As institutions, how can we support that? As government, how can we support that? So these are only 4 points that have come out, but they are big points. They are complex points. And it goes back to what I was saying about change. In order to implement changes like this, even if you want to and you may not want to, takes time, takes thought, takes resource. Implications for education systems and teachers. So in the circle, I have language assessment literacy. I'm not a fan of that term because I think for a lot of teachers, it's quite meaningless. I prefer, but it is the accepted term, I prefer to call it development in assessment matters. Language assessment literacy for me is the cornerstone for teachers and education systems where assessment is concerned. In terms of integrating assessment, in terms of helping teachers with technology, and as I said, I think it starts with pre-service education. Now, when I talk about language assessment literacy, I talk about those things that I mentioned before. For me, there are basics teachers need to know about assessment, and I'm sure you've heard this all before, but I'm going to repeat it. We need to know the purpose of assessment. Why are we assessing students at any one point? What will they gain from it, and what will we gain from it as teachers and trainers? Number 2, once we know how we assess, why we assess, then we need to know how we're going to assess. What's the best way to do it? Is it through a quiz? Is it through a test? Is it through a Q&A? Is it through a formal test? Shall I do it informally? Shall I focus on speaking? Shall I focus on writing? Shall I do all the skills? What shall I do? So once you know why, you need to know how. And then, for me, equally as important, once I know how, what am I going to do with that information? What am I going to do with 56 out of 100? Or what am I going to do with, that was a good effort, well done? What do you do with the information you get from a student's assessment? How do you feed that back into your own teaching and therefore the student's learning? And for me, one of the most underrated and underutilized aspects of assessment globally is the art of feedback. Giving your students feedback. And every student, if they have been assessed, should get feedback. I understand it's not easy when you have large classes and a lot of classes. I understand that. But in an ideal world, if I am being assessed, I want to know how I did. I want to know how I can do better. And for me, all of that should come in pre-service education. One of the things that came out from the findings, again, not just for this region, globally, was that pre-service education, the assessment modules need to be strengthened. They need to be integrated. They need to be joined up with other modules. More time needs to be given to assessment. There are, not here, there are pre-service courses around the world where there isn't an assessment module. So for me, in terms of teacher development, teacher improvement, this is where it starts. And I know there are wonderful, wonderful in-service programs all over the world, including here in Egypt and Cairo. I understand that. And I think that's brilliant. But I think they would be even more better if teachers came in with a foundation, a basic foundation of what good assessment is. And that's what I mean by language assessment literacy. One of the things that came out from the project, technology, it's been phenomenal to me just observing it, how teachers have just gone online the best they can and done the best for their students. And I think teachers around the world need to be applauded. You really, really do, for doing an amazing job. But in how many pre-service education courses do we have modules in technology? Not many. And how to integrate technology? Not many. And yet, one of the things that students want is to use technology, especially now, because the pandemic has been a catalyst, and that's what they've had. Whether they've had access to laptops, to iPads, to their mobile phones, a lot of students are now learning on a gadget. And I just wonder how prepared teacher development and teacher training courses are for this. So language assessment literacy isn't something that is done once and never done again. This is something that teachers should get throughout their careers. It should start at pre-service education, and as developments are made, teachers need to be topped up. They need to keep being helped with aspects of assessment that are new. Whenever the curriculum changes, whenever new materials, whenever something changes, assessment will be impacted. And that needs to be included in any additional training that teachers are given. One thing that I want to say right now, I've talked a lot about policymakers and academics and influencers. There was a reason that we started with that particular those particular stakeholder groups, because we wanted overviews of national or regional policies and practices. And during the pandemic, it really, really wasn't feasible to talk to as many people as we wanted. So we thought we would start with those groups and get an overview. However, we know full well that a very, very important and critical group that we need to talk to is you, teachers, educators, trainers, because you are at the chalk face. You're using the language, you're teaching the language, you're working with students day in, day out. So, you don't need to take this QR code now if you don't want to, you can, but we have a survey for teachers. We want to know what you think about the future of English. We want your opinions. We really are interested to know what you think. So we know what 92 policymakers, academics, and influencers around the world think, and we have lots of insights from those, but that's not enough. We're interested in what you think. We're interested in what you do. So I know a lot of you are already scanning this QR code, and that's fine. This QR code takes you to a microsite for the project, and if you just scroll down, you'll get to a survey. It doesn't take long to complete. You do not have to complete it. It's up to you. But I think it's worth just looking at the kind of questions that we're asking. in terms of how important you think English is and will be. How do you think your practice will change post-pandemic? It was really nice to hear Dr. Mohammed say that after 2 years, we're back on campus. I would love to be a fly on the wall in your classrooms to know what is happening and how you continue educating your students from now on. I do have a workshop later on today, and if anybody's coming, it is really going to be a conversation between us about the future of English, about assessment practices, and how you see them developing, because I am interested in your opinions. And with that, I'm a little bit short, but thank you very much indeed. Happy to take questions. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mina. That was brilliant and so insightful, really. Before we take questions from the floor, there is an important announcement I'd like to make. There is a room change. So in Ewart Hall, this room at 1:30, we're going to host English score team. That's a British Council test. It's a British Council product. They're going to talk about assessment. And Mr. Mohammed Abdul Wahab about translation learners assessment in light of technological gaps, problems, and solution will be moved to room 108. So 108 will be hosting Mohammed Abdul Wahab session, and Ewart Hall, this hall, will be hosting English score at 1:30. Thank you very much.
My dear colleagues, I can see that there are 2 lost IDs. Maram Adil, Asma Muhammad. So please pick them up from me, okay? Thank you very much, Mina Patel. I think now I want you please to check the conference book. And I'd like to thank you very much for the wonderful talk. Please, let's give her a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Okay. And what's... I'm very much interested in the world Englishes, especially Egyptian English. Let's not make anyone make fun of our Egyptian English. We speak English. As long as it's understood, we have to be respected. Thank you. So, once again, guys, if you've got any questions or queries, we've got Mina here. Yes, please. Yes. Okay, you've got another mic here. Sure.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm Dr. Marwa Al-Alidi. I'm honored to be with you today. And thank you so much for this interesting presentation. I have a question. I heard you say that in near future, inshallah, you will have alternative ways and methods of assessing English as a global language. And you said that the book will be published next year. So I'm asking about these new methods. Is there anything that you can say or tell us about concerning these methods? Thank you.
Can I use this? Thank you very much for the question. In terms of the alternative methods, One of the reasons that they are alternative and they're linked to local context is simply because of the point that Dr. Mohammed just made, because of the different Englishes. So those alternative methods will be very contextual, will be very local. The idea is not to have them standardized. So we will not be developing them. They will be developed. That's what we were told in local context, where there is the expertise and the capacity to do so. In terms of the book, where all of these findings will come out, the book will be published, I think, in March or April next year. But we'll definitely let everybody know. And it will be accessible for everyone. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
This is Maha Hosni, English for Inclusive Education Special Interest Group from Nile TESOL. So my question concerning students with disabilities. In the online world, we need to form a sort of an isosceles care triangle from the parent, the teacher, and the student. How can we make them ready for all the what-ifs? How can we support them for all the what-ifs? For example, the pandemic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so parents, teachers, and students. One of the things that did come out, again, on a global level, not just an Egyptian or regional level, was the prominence now of the parent as an important stakeholder in the whole education process. Whereas before, children come to school or go to university, the parent is at home, probably a little bit detached from the whole process. However, you bring learning into the home, parents are at home as well, because we worked online for a long time, and suddenly they are involved, they're interested, they have to be, because who else is going to support the child at home? And one of the things that has been proposed is, I was talking about language assessment literacy for teachers. So one of the things that was proposed was assessment literacy, or just learning literacy for parents, and workshops and materials around that. Now, I know some governments are already beginning to work on that, but it's still in its infancy. But I think where parents are concerned, that is a growing domain, so to speak. So that will be happening. Thank you. Any other questions? There's a lady over there. Can she have a microphone? Oh, you can, yes. Lovely.
Okay, I have a question concerning assessment.
Yes.
All the time, we didn't learn how to assess people, how we assess our students. And you said that we should know the why, the how, and what to do with the information. Would you recommend us a book that can help us with this?
That's a really good question. First of all, can I just clarify? I think I said that education, pre-service education needs to be stronger. I think teachers can assess. I think it's instinctive, it's part of the whole process. But sometimes I think it can be better if we know why we're doing it and how to do it. In terms of books, I can recommend many books. I don't want to advocate one, but it would be easier if I just shared a slide that can be shared with everybody with some references. Is that all right? Just practical books. Hala, if I do a slide, can that be shared with teachers tomorrow? I can do that. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes. Hi.
No, it's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
My name is Lynn, and I'm a teacher at Forest University at Tokyo. So my question is, since we are talking about reimagining the system, so can we say, hypothetically speaking, that we can take the process of the system outside the classroom? Is it possible?
Definitely. I love that idea. Yeah. I think probably better to give her the microphone so she can ask me.
ممكن تعيدي السؤال تاني تعيديه في المايك.
Yes. Well, my question was, can we take assessment outside the classroom, especially if we are assessing speaking? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good question. Can we take assessment out of the classroom? Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, mobile phones, tablets, everything, of course you can. You can ask students to record themselves. You can ask them to upload it. What you do need to be careful about is how often you do this. Yeah, think about, again, I think it's a great idea. Why are we doing it? What are we going to get from it? But take it outside the classroom, definitely. Yeah, if your students are happy with that. Yeah?
Mina, we have a question from the back, so you cannot see them. So
we've got a microphone, great.
You talk about diversity and equality, but I think the equation between diversity and equality is very hard to apply in assessment. Especially we are talking about multinational students maybe, and we are teaching a language which is multi-origin. We are talking about many dialects, many grammars inside one language. How could we apply this in a very simple way to young learners, especially who are studying a second language like English? Thank you.
That's a very good question. With multinational classes, with mixed ability, with lots of diversity in the classroom, trying to think about equality, diversity, and inclusion is not easy at all. But these things, I think, start at a systemic level. They start at a policy level. And I think they need to be fed down. And one of the things, I mean, all of the points I talked about, I said these are big things and very complex things. And I think the danger that I see a lot of institutions and governments doing, they want to solve everything all at once. And it's not possible. So you take one thing that is a priority for your institution, your system, or your classroom even, and tackle that one thing at a time, because, and this is something that we're going to talk about in the workshop, everything that we change has an impact on the students. And if we think we're going through a lot of change, how much change are they going through? And how much can they take? So I think it's about prioritizing and thinking about what's important and doing one thing at a time. It's not, you're completely right, it's not easy to do everything, especially when you have large classes, multinational, and mixed levels. But thank you for the question.
Hi, Mina. I'm Sahar. I'm Sahar Wafqi Ismail, English teacher, secondary stage. Technology is not my enemy, first of all, but I feel it's something like a maze, something like a deep well in which we all have fallen and we cannot get out of it. So can you give me some bits of advice? How can I make this balance between using technology and using classic methods of assessment? Is there something that can help in this? I need something blended, like blended learning. We can use technology, but we cannot ignore classic methods of teaching, learning, and making assessment. This is very important. We need paper and pen. We need paper books. We need something to have in our hands. Our eyes are tired from looking at screens all the time, and this is something I feel like, you know, can you imagine two classes, a teacher and the students? There's something, there is life. Eye contact, body language, thumbs up, all this, and another class with screens and students, no life. So how can we make this balance between technology and classic methods of teaching, learning, or assessment? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. Firstly, I want to say I think you're not alone in feeling like this. I think there are lots and lots of people, not only in this room, but around the world that are feeling the same and have the same question. Secondly, only because of interest of time, can you come to the workshop? Because that's one of the things we're going to talk about, and we will talk about it then. Is that all right? Otherwise, it's going to take me a long time to answer. Is that all right? Otherwise, if you can't come to the workshop, find me at lunchtime or during a break. I'm around for 2 days. Lovely. Thank you so much. can this lady ask a question?
Yes.
Oh, after that
just-
gentleman, yes, you can. After that gentleman. Yes,
Just
sir.
a quick one. It's a three-part question. Now, talking about the speaking assessment, what do you think, how is it assessed in terms of standardized testing? As you may very well aware that it's the minimum time, 16 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, some tests even 5 to 10 minutes. Do you think this is okay at this time of age? And if that's okay, is this gonna change in the near future when it comes to standardized testing? And the second part, if I'm gonna do assessment outside of the classroom, can I do that at home? Because as you know, in this part of the world, we don't practice English unless we're in the classroom. How about the other 85% of our time? Can parents do that? And the third part, the ABCs of assessment, could that be taught to parents? Thank you.
Thank you very much for those multiple questions. I'm going to take them backwards, if that's all right. So can parents be taught the ABC of assessment? I think that goes back to this lady's question here, and I think yes. I think parents can be supported and helped in understanding what assessment not only entails, but why we do it and its benefits for their children. So yes. The second one, assessment outside the classroom. I think, again, that goes back to helping learners and their parents understand why you're doing it. Now, if there is the culture that English is only practiced in the classroom, and you really think that they can benefit from assessment outside the classroom, I think it's up to you as a teacher to encourage that, explain that, and help them understand. I don't think anything is impossible. I really don't. It depends on how much you think it is worth the time in helping learners and parents understand the value of it. And your third question was about standardized testing for speaking. Do I think 15 minutes is enough? It depends for what purpose. I think 15 minutes can be enough. I think, to be honest with you, 15 minutes is enough if students are used to speaking. But it depends what for. Does that make sense? What is 15 minutes enough for? Thank you. Can I just pass it to this lady? She's been waiting very patiently. Do you mind? Oh, you have one, great.
First of all, I am very honored to be with you today. All of pleasure to you. My question about what is your opinion about content analysis before we put our assessment to our students? Content analysis. Yeah. Sorry about my language. I'm not a specialist.
No, that's all right. So the question, I still didn't get the question though. How do you order it? Okay, in terms of content analysis in that context, I would look at what it is you want the students to achieve, yeah? Even before you think about how you're going to teach it, think about how you're going to assess it first. Then think about how you're going to teach it. That's how I would do it. Does that answer your question? Great.
Mina, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask you about the rise of China. How do you see the impact of the rise of China on English? Thank you.
That's a really interesting question. How do I see the impact of... China is interesting. I think Chinese, if I look at the data that's come out from the project, Chinese is increasing in popularity and usage, but not at the rate that, and this is personal for me, not at the rate that I thought it would do. I think the Chinese are very interested, from what we're told, in learning English, being part of the English-speaking world in order to export their own culture, which I think is an interesting take on English. I think eventually not only Chinese, but Spanish and Arabic will come to challenge English. But that hasn't happened yet. But China, I think we need to just to wait and see. I think the pandemic has probably halted things for China a little bit. But that's an interesting question. Good question, thank you. There's one more. Can I say last question, that gentleman over there? Is that all right?
Thanks a lot. Hello, I'm an English instructor. The question is, referring back to the beginning, saying that quizzes could be fun for students. Well, they enjoy the sessions, but when it comes to the assessment, they find it really difficult. They suffer from kind of examophobia. And when they panic and they get bad results, they get frustrated. So any idea to let them feel like it's a kind of enjoyment and fun? Thank you.
Thank you. Very good point. Do you know what? I don't think it's just students. I think everybody panics when they're going to get tested. I remember when I did my driving test. I was like, ooh. Yeah. So I think tests do that, regardless of whether you call them quizzes or games or not. Now, I think it goes back to helping learners understand the purpose of assessment, why you're doing that. If learners ultimately understand that it's going to benefit them and it's going to help you teach them better, I think that will help the anxiety. But again, that has to happen at the beginning of the class, right at the beginning of when you start teaching them. And you have to actually use assessment in an ongoing and continuous way so that students don't feel threatened by it, that it's just part of another class. And yeah, and I think vary the way that you do assessment. And I think that's really important, and that goes to my first point about, a variety of classroom-based assessments. And again, for me, that goes back to pre-service education, and I think that's one of the core elements that an assessment module should include. And I'm being motioned at and pointed at. I'm sorry, I've got to stop. But thank you very much indeed for wonderful questions and your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We're going to have a break for the prayers and lunch from 12 to 1, and we're starting over again at 1:30. Please check out the program book and select your sessions. Thank you very much.